Welcome to the penultimate video in my Dragon Age retrospective, where I'll be reviewing the main campaign of Dragon Age Inquisition. I did buy this game way back when it was released in 2014, and I got pretty far in it, only to stop playing about 3/4 of the way through. I can't remember exactly why I stopped now. It was most likely another game that came along. I always wanted to see it through to the end though, so I decided that this was the year, and not only would I complete Inquisition at last, I would also replay the other games in the series and make new videos for them. My quest is nearly complete at last. I just have to share my thoughts about the game and then the DLC with you, and I can rest until Dragon Age 4 appears. So now that I have sealed all the breaches and sent Coryphipus back where he came from, let's find out what I thought of it. Plot and character have always been major strengths of not just BioWare in general, but also the Dragon Age series in particular. While games like Knights of the Old Republic and Mass Effect do feature some very strong fleshed out characters, I personally find that the Dragon Age games take this to another level. Inquisition has evolved the idea of loyalty missions even further than before, because now they are much larger affairs that span multiple areas and take a good chunk of the game to see through to the end. I was quite surprised by just how many unique conversations there were available with your companions back at your home base. They would have something new to say after a major story quest was completed, as you would expect, but they would also frequently have new stuff to chat about at regular intervals in between. As you slowly build up your approval rating with them, you would unlock even more conversations and quests for them, including unique romance quests for the characters that you are able to woo. In terms of specific characters, my own personal favourites included Sarah, Blackwall and Cassandra. I do know that some find Sarah to be particularly irritating, but I found her to be funny and well acted. I was less keen on Vivian because of her upper class attitude and silly attire, but I wouldn't say there's really a bad character among the bunch. It was also very nice to see familiar faces like Varric, Leliana and Cullen return from earlier games, though I was a bit disappointed that Varric didn't seem to have much left to say to me after a certain point in the game, probably because of an important choice that I made that he didn't approve of. The overall storyline of Inquisition is actually fairly simple. There is a big bad Darkspawn Magister trying to gain entry to the Fade and enter the fabled Black City, which will bring about the end of the world. Your character has already foiled his plan once by the time the game has properly begun, by being in the wrong place at the right time. As a result of interrupting Coryphipus' dark ritual, a magical mark has been transferred onto your hand, which it turns out can be used to close the Fade rifts that have been opening up all over Thedas. You go from prisoner to leader of the Inquisition rather quickly, which is my only real issue with the story overall. Aside from this, there are some really great scenes throughout the game which are really powerful, in particular one where you and the rest of the Inquisition narrowly escape death and various members break out into song. This could have been quite easily extremely cheesy, but instead it is touching and inspiring. Another standout moment for me was one where you are suddenly transported into the future and you find a captured Leliana who has been tortured and broken. Seeing what had been done to her made me all the more determined to travel back to the past and prevent it from ever happening. A certain amount of players won't even see this last quest. You are given the choice of aiding either mages or the Templars, giving you a different story path as a result, and setting up the bad guy of that quest as a minor rival for you for a good chunk of the rest of the game afterwards. This is the game at its most powerful and rewarding. While Dragon Age Inquisition can frequently look very nice, the technical side of things can really let it down on a regular basis. The design work of the clothing, buildings, etc. is second to none, and the attention to detail is exceptional. However, the frame rate is frequently appalling, and this can be incredibly distracting. What's more, Inquisition was released before things like the PS4 Pro, Xbox One X, 4K resolution and HDR lighting were introduced, so it doesn't take advantage of any of those things. Sadly, BioWare or EA never went back and patched the game to improve it. When the game is running well and everything is smooth, it's great, but all too often it descends into a juddery mess. I have even had it freeze up and crash on me altogether on more than one occasion, but luckily I didn't lose any progress as a result. The music of Dragon Age Inquisition is quite different from that of the previous games in the series. There is less of a foreboding menace to the soundtrack, and more of an upbeat, marching epic feel to most of it. The main theme of the game is undoubtedly a real belter, and I listen to it outside of the game on a fairly regular basis. While you are exploring the open world sections of the game, the music takes more of a back seat, being quite quiet and there for atmosphere, only ramping up again when you get into combat. In the more linear story-based missions, the music is much more pronounced and cinematic. I have already singled out the voice acting for Sarah earlier, but really, there isn't a bad bit of voice acting amongst the whole cast. Other favourites of mine include Blackwall and Iron Bull, voiced by Freddie Prinze Jr., who returns to BioWare games after his stint in Mass Effect 3. He sounds quite different here though. Sound effect work is generally of a high standard with some nice flame or lightning effects when you zap enemies with your mage spells. Sometimes sound effects would drop out entirely for a while though, which was rather odd. I'm assuming that this is a glitch rather than a deliberate design choice. Overall though, the sound and music of Inquisition is generally very strong. Inquisition introduces open world design and gameplay into the Dragon Age series for the first time. There are various sizable areas for you to explore, completing quests for the locals and expanding the influence of the Inquisition as you go. Every so often you will come across a good location to set up a base camp, which unlocks a fast travel location and gives you somewhere to stock up on potions, rest and change party members. There are certain things that repeat across the different regions of Ferelden and Orlais, such as Fade Rifts, where you do battle against several waves of demons before using the mark on your hand to seal the rift for good, and Astrariums, which are join the dot style puzzles based on the Thedas astrological chart. These always come in threes, and when you complete a set, a beam of light points the way to a nice bit of loot. Then there are Oculariums, which look like creepy skulls and are used to spot the locations of mysterious shards. Some of these shards can be a bit of a pain to get to, but none of them are impossible with a bit of experimentation. As you make progress in the game, you will eventually discover what these shards are for. You also have a home base which you can go back to for a rest or a chat with the rest of your party and your three advisors, Lady Josephine, Spymaster Leliana and Commander Cullen. You will also find the War Room here, which is where you can launch missions that take a certain amount of real time to complete, much like similar systems in games like Assassin's Creed Black Flag. The timer keeps going even when you are not playing the game, so I found the best thing to do was run the shorter missions while I was off adventuring somewhere else in Thedas, and save the really long ones for when I was about to log off and go to bed or work. Then by the time I came back the next day, they'd be finished. That really just leaves the combat for me to talk about, the style of which really depends on the difficulty level that you decide to play the game on. If you're going to stick with the default difficulty or higher, then you should really try and get to grips with the tactical mode. This pauses the game, changes to an overhead view, and allows you to instruct each member of your party individually, positioning them where you want them, telling them which abilities to use and when. If all that micromanaging is not for you, then you can also play in real time, but this very quickly becomes challenging unless you lower the difficulty. I have no qualms in saying that's exactly what I did. If you do use the more tactical approach, then you can probably expect the length of the game to be extended by quite a few hours, because you will probably die quite a lot and have to try again, as well as go back to a camp more often for potions. For the most part, Inquisition sticks to the open world formula, plenty of collectibles, mission types that are repeated often across the different world zones, etc. But this is combined with their high quality storytelling and experience at delivering well designed, entertaining RPGs, so in general it works really well. In the past, BioWare RPGs have been some of the most replayable of all, thanks to the multiple choices that you can make that usually carry over into any sequels. Due to the sheer size of Inquisition, it is rather less replayable than games that have come before it. That's not to say I wouldn't replay it one day, but it is a much bigger decision to replay a 80 to 100 hour game than it is a 30 or so hour one. In terms of value though, you can't get much better than this, including all of the DLC, which you might as well because you can get the main game alongside all of it for about £8. It does offer tremendous value for money. The game certainly doesn't force you to do everything either, so if you find Sealing Fade Rifts particularly boring for example, then you don't have to. BioWare's unfamiliarity with EA's Frostbite engine led to some frustrations and technical shortcomings with Inquisition, but their design flair and expertise at crafting excellent story-driven RPGs still shine through. I am less keen on the open world portions on the game than I am the linear plot-driven missions, but they are not bad either. For Dragon Age 4, I am hoping for a return to the more linear single-player experience, but early reports suggest that BioWare may be headed in the other direction, and that it may be an online-only games-as-a-service experience. I really hope that they learn from their considerable mistakes with Anthem and either change their mind or do it right this time. As it is, they are dangerously close from going away forever, and I would be heartbroken to see BioWare close, as I expect many of you would too. A lot is riding on the next few projects for BioWare, so fingers crossed they get it right.